So, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out and supporting this important ceremony, especially at this time when the world seems to have lost its mind. Of course, we're part of the world, aren't we? So, we can ask ourselves if we've lost our minds. Who's right and who's wrong? I'll get into that a little bit, but not in terms of answering that question. It's the wrong question. So, this is our atonement ceremony. This is where we connect with all the unskillful behavior that has occurred individually and collectively throughout all space and time. And I've been really dreading this talk because I've really been feeling the weight of it. I don't know how it's been for you lately, but I've really been feeling the weight of unskillfulness falling on my neck, mine and everyone's. So usually these talks are focused on what's in the precepts, but I'm going to approach the precepts by focusing what is not in the precepts. And the three words that have been rattling around in my head recently are fear, hatred, and brutality. Those words are not in the precepts. But I think the precepts have a lot to say about those words. Fear, hatred, and brutality. And as I say those words, what do you notice in yourself? Check in with your body and notice how it is for you to confront these words and the energies behind them. So we call greed, anger, and ignorance the three poisons. And in the precepts, this corresponds to the 8th, 9th, and 5th precepts, respectively. The three poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance. But unfortunately, there are other poisons that circulate in the human system as well. So I've chosen these other poisons, which seem to be right now more topical, at least for me. And we should not ignore the other poisons. So, is it not remarkable how destructive human beings are? How energetically we destroy ourselves and each other and the earth? It seems like our efforts in that regard are absolutely limitless and tireless. And I wonder when we will exhaust ourselves in those efforts. When will we look at ourselves and say, enough? Enough destruction of the totality of life through these terrible efforts that we make to improve our own particular positions at the expense of everything and everyone else. I think we'll be waiting for a while. We destroy because we cannot accept the truths of impermanence and non-separation. We can't accept that things change. We cling to what we want and reject what we don't want. And non-separation, that's even bigger as a problem, isn't it? That person over there has nothing to do with me, and I can blame them for whatever's going on here. It's their fault, not mine. I've done plenty of that. Don't get me wrong. I'm an expert at blaming other people for my problems. But thanks to this practice, I'm at least aware of the tendency and aware of the options other than doing that. So we are incredibly ignorant to be blaming others for our own mistakes, our own problems. This ignorance creates a separation between us and them and us. Our vocabulary can't help but reinforce this erroneous idea. So going back to the words fear and hate, the separation comes into play in fear and hate. I mean, we create another, and we fear that person, and we may hate them as well, depending on the level of threat. It's because we perceive the other, who we designate, each of us designates that for ourselves. Whoever the other is, the person who's not like us, the person we're not comfortable with, or the group that we consider to be alien to our way of life. And then with that separation conveniently come the fear and loathing. That is so easy and for many so enjoyable to exercise. And then, because our separation allows fear and hate, the fear and hate have to be directed, and often that direction becomes brutal. So, can you see the chain of association, the chain of causation? Separation, other, fear and hate, brutality, that kind of thing. And this is all very convenient if one doesn't want to look at oneself. Very convenient, very comfortable. And it's comfortable because we don't have to look at our own role in manufacturing this scenario. We are actually creating it. We're a little factory creating fear and hate in this scenario. But rather than examining the cogs and wheels of that machinery and possibly disabling it, we point the finger elsewhere and declare that place, that person, that group to be the problem. Just an aside, can we fear without hating? Can we hate without fearing? The complex relationship between fear and hate is beyond the scope of this talk, but I think it definitely merits inquiry. I encourage us all to think about how fear and hate are operating specifically in our lives. As Buddhist practitioners, however, we are working constructively to see, understand, and confront fear and hatred, and to reject brutality. I don't think I mentioned the word power, and that's another word that's been coming up in my mind. Power, and how power interrelates with fear and hate. There are basically two kinds of power. There's power over the self, or what I would call internal power, and there's power over other people, or what I would call external power. Internal power is much harder to gain. That's what we're doing here when we sit and when we practice in our daily lives as an extension of our zazen. We are cultivating power over ourselves. The ability to choose freely our responses to situations and people, rather than having automated reptilian brainstem responses to other people and situations. We can increasingly have purchase over our emotional damage and actually choose freely how we respond or if we respond. Not responding can be a response. Sometimes it's far and away the best response. But we don't, of course, separate crudely in this practice internal and external. I use these words loosely. Internal power is not limited to the individual, just as external power is not limited to the so-called other. There is some interpenetration between these realms, And what I've noticed is that if we attain external power or power over someone else or another group without having internal power, the result can be tyranny. Power exercised over other people without any self-discipline, without any self-insight, without any self-control can devolve into tyranny. I leave it to you to judge for yourselves from the headlines whether any of that might be going on at this moment. I'm not saying either way, but reflect well on whether internal power is being exercised while external power is being visited upon others, so-called others. Internal power may be called the fruit of practice. Sharing that power, which has nothing to do with our egos, our individual selves, is saving all sentient beings. We save them by offering them our own self-control. It's really win-win. This practice is just so marvelous in that it endows us with these capabilities. It's hard work to get there, but well worth it in this world, which needs it so desperately. Can you imagine what it would be like in this room if everyone who was in pain showed up here right now to offer their bodies and their lives for this practice? What would it be like if they crowded in here and simply bowed to the possibility of seeing themselves fully and compassionately and using that sight to save all sentient beings? Coming back to impermanence and non-separation, how often do any of us live those truths? The truths of impermanence and non-separation must be lived. In the moment, we must realize their value and their inevitability. The precepts are here to help us live the truths of impermanence and non-separation. And to turn to the precepts, you may have noticed that they begin and end with the three treasures. There are the three pure precepts and the 10 gray precepts as well. But the three refuges which start the precepts are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And these three refuges, as we express them in our version of the precepts, are: I take refuge in the Buddha, the awakened nature of all beings. This is oneness. I take refuge in the Dharma, the ocean of wisdom and compassion. This is diversity. I take refuge in the Sangha, the interdependence of all creations. This is harmony. Really, you could just stop right there. Oneness, diversity, harmony. There's much more, of course, to the precepts than just these three refuges, but the three refuges are our ultimate refuge, and we need to see them that way. So to start with Buddha, all beings have awakened nature. All beings are endowed with awakened nature. Of course, they must practice to realize it, as do we, but recognize that anyone, anywhere, at any time, regardless of their actions and behavior, has the awakened nature, is amply endowed with it. And if you recognize that when you disapprove of something or someone, you might be surprised how they look to you after you recognize that. All you have to do is look at them and say, yeah, that person could be a Buddha. Someday, somewhere, that person could be a Buddha. It really shifts things. And as for taking refuge in the Dharma, the ocean of wisdom and compassion, Dogen writes The many rivers which flow into the ocean become the one taste of the ocean, the Buddha Dharma, the world itself as it is. The many rivers which flow into the ocean become the one taste of the ocean. No discrimination, no separation, all blended in. There is, in this metaphor of the ocean, oneness and diversity, right? So he's found a brilliant way to express exactly what the three refuges are telling us. Gakudo, I need you to go and get a bag with a book in it next to the computer. It's a white bag. I forgot to bring it. Can you? Thank you. Yeah, by the computer in the office. Yeah. See if you can find it. Thanks. Sorry. I meant, as I was sitting, to get that book, and I forgot. So, as for the Sangha, Dogen, in the text that our friend is getting for me, the Chanuan King Hui writes, "The Sangha is the most precious of all things." Thank you, you can put it right there. "Those who live in this community are unfettered by the pettiness of social affairs. Such a community manifests a refined posture, devoid of fabrication about the world." So here, of course, he's talking about the community of monks, but where does the Sangha end? Is there any limit to the Sangha? Is there anyone excluded from the Sangha? Anywhere? No. There is not a single being in this world who is not included in the Sangha. So just as they all have awakened nature, they are all in the Sangha, regardless of what our opinions are about them. We are all connected. We are not separate. And the moment of realization is not separate from the worst of us. In our worst moments, the moment of enlightenment is not separate from that moment. So I know we all want to draw really bright lines around what we approve of and what we don't, but those lines are false. And what we approve of and disapprove of are false delusions. So when we remember the one taste of the ocean in which all of us are swimming equally, continually, changing, and not separate, we can enjoy the one taste of that ocean, which is us. Right now, the one taste of that ocean is us. All of us, equally. So, after the three refuges, there are the three pure precepts and then the 10 grave precepts. And the 10 grave precepts end with the 10th precept, which is not defaming the three treasures. So if you're familiar with scientific research, it has found that people remember most vividly the first and last thing they were told. So it's no coincidence that the precepts are structured to have the first thing and the last thing be the three treasures. So the 10th precept, not defaming the three treasures, has three expressions that we use here at this temple. Bodhidharma's commentary is, self-nature is subtle and mysterious. In the realm of the one, not holding nihilistic concepts of ordinary beings and sages, is called the precepts of not defaming the three treasures. Nihilistic concepts of ordinary beings and sages, doesn't that hit the nail on the head? Isn't that exactly the definition of the suffering that I've been talking about? The ordinary beings are the ones we don't approve of, and the sages, of course, are inevitably us. How convenient. We have to remove these props from under ourselves and fall flat on our face. We cannot stand on dignity, our intelligence, our righteousness. All of that is useless. Leave that to other people. That's the difference between a practitioner and a non-practitioner. We're no better. We're flat on our face. How perfect. And isn't that what we do here when we bow? We're flat on our face. Nihilistic concepts. That's quite beautiful, isn't it? Nihilistic concepts. So Dogen's commentary is a lot more mysterious. The teisho of the actual body is the harbor and the weir. This is the most important thing in the world. Its virtue finds its home in the ocean of essential nature. It is beyond explanation. We just accept it with respect and gratitude. So, thanks to Enkyo Roshi, I actually know what a weir is, having been to many fusatsus officiated by Roshi. So a weir is where fish spawn. In the ocean, perhaps. And they swim in a circular pattern and they create this kind of sanctuary for themselves where they fertilize their eggs in the ocean of essential nature. And a harbor, of course, you know, is a safe and secure place to ride out the storms. And what this really gets at is that the three treasures are our ultimate refuge. The Buddha, the awakened nature of all beings, the Dharma, the ocean of wisdom and compassion, and the Sangha, the interdependence of all creations, are our ultimate refuge. So we would best not defame them, not slander them, not think ill of them, but treasure them, because they are protecting us. They are sustaining us. They are supporting us. They are us. So when we defame or disrespect or think ill of the three treasures, we're doing that to ourselves. It's a kind of masochism. So don't be masochistic, and don't be sadistic either. Strange how difficult it is not to be masochistic or sadistic. We get a lot of encouragement to do one or the other. Lots of S&M prompts from the world. So I'd like to close with a quote from our study text from our most recent Ango. And in case you don't know what it is, it's How to Cook Your Life. If you haven't read this book, it's right there on the shelf in our store. Make sure you read this book. It's really got a lot to offer. I've read it repeatedly. It still bears reading again and again. So, in chapter 6 of this book, we read the following. Usually we set up a world in opposition to ourself, and then go about trying to pocket for ourselves as much wealth, power, or happiness from that world as we can. When our way of life accords with the Buddha Dharma, we no longer construct a world in opposition to what we think of as our self. Rather, we see that the whole world is the true self. This path is the way of the Dharma, since there is no longer an other to be dependent upon. We have neither a need to be swayed by something or someone we think exists outside ourselves, nor do we long for things that we project as being apart from ourselves. I don't think I could say it any more plainly. Let's stop our fantasizing about the world as it should be and confront the world as it is. Make decisions based on reality and not overestimate the righteousness of our positions in distinction to whatever it is we think we oppose. By all means, take your viewpoint, but realize that pro and con are both expressions of suffering. And if you think I'm above that, not in the least. As soon as I get home, I'll open the newspaper and I'll have a million opinions about whatever I read about. That's the work, is to know that those opinions are not real. And yet, we live in the world and have to act and behave in the world. It's not simple at all. I wish you joy and a deep experience of reality in navigating this very fine edge of none of it's real, and yet I've got to behave and act within this unreal system that thinks it's real. Thank you very much.